Hey guys, okay, so I'm going to go through the process of how to 3D model the NES controller. So this video was recorded without sound and I'm voiceovering, so I'm going to be kind of watching and catching up with whatever I'm doing on here. So the file that I've given you on the Google Classroom should give you access to this that you're seeing on screen at the moment. We've got an NES image looking top down, placed onto a plane, and then I've frozen the image. You can see here, right clicking the plane and choosing its properties, you can choose whether to show something in grey when it's frozen or not. Clearly we're going to want to be able to see the image, so we make sure that turn grey when frozen is turned off, and then we can refreeze the plane. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to start with a box, and we're looking in the top viewport. With this box, we're not concerned really with the height and width segments at all. I've got mine set to 1 on 1, so there isn't any extra segments. And then remember, when you're drawing in the top viewport, that you're not only drawing the width and length, but you're also drawing the height after you've clicked the first time. So just make sure you switch to the perspective viewport and have a look and adjust the height, so that it's kind of the right height for the NES controller. There are a couple of them in the room that you can use to sort of help you out. Alt and X on the keyboard will turn the box into sort of a see-through mode, which is obviously quite necessary for us when we're modelling this. And then also pressing J on the keyboard will get rid of these bounding box edges that you see. I've just pressed it to get rid of them there. So our next stage with this, the box that we've created, is to right click it and then choose Convert to an Editable Poly. I'm then selecting the very top face of the box, and in the modifier stack you can see down here that I'm clicking Inset, and then I'm adjusting the inset. I've not just clicked Inset and doing it manually, I've clicked the little settings box next to Inset, and I'm using that then to carefully adjust how much I want it to inset by. Now I'm not doing this for the little change in colour, so you've got the grey on the outside and then black in the middle. It's not for that. I'm doing this inset just so that we can adjust our corners to make them more rounded. You don't have to do this bit right now, you can probably do the corners towards the end, but I just wanted to get them out of the way so that I had a better understanding of how many polys I had left. You have a limit on this asset of 800 triangles, so for me I just wanted to make sure I was keeping an eye on how many I was using. Anything that's circular obviously is going to take up a lot more triangles, so here you can see me kind of trying to work out the best way of adding in these edges, and I think I changed my mind at this point and choose to redo it bit by bit. So so here you can see I've not only have I just clicked on the option to chamfer, but I'm also changing the amount of chamfers by doing it once and then clicking the little plus icon and then doing it again. The last step in order to get these corners to look right is I'm using a target weld, so you have to be on the vertice button, so you can press number 1 on the keyboard, and then you can see on the right hand side under edit vertices I've selected the option for target weld, and I'm welding those extra edges, those extra vertices to the one in the middle. So I've run around and done that all around the asset. I skipped that step because you don't really want to spend your time watching me do that, but you can see here that I've welded those edges straight across. If you missed that step, just go back in the video and re-watch how I did the first one, and it's exactly the same for all of the rest. So the next stage is I want to do this little section in the middle. There is definitely a clear change in the height of the asset where those two black rubber buttons are, so that's something that I do want to actually put in. You're going to find when you start 3D modeling that you want to add all the details possible. Majority of the time it's not necessary. You only really need to add the ones that have got some a decent amount of depth or changes in elevation. A lot of the other smaller little kind of nooks and crannies that we've got on here, like the little sort of section that you can see next to the red button, that there is so small that you can do it with a normal map. So I've inset it again, same way as we did for the first section, and then I've inset one more time to create that bit in the middle. Once the inset's done, I'm then using the move tool only and just dropping it down. Your other option is, after you've done your first inset, you could probably use bevel to minously extrude that part of that face, and then bevel it inwards. It's up to you which way you do it. Like I said to you on day one, there's many different ways of modelling something in 3ds Max. So here I'm just looking at, I really want those edges. It is such a small area, but it is clearly quite rounded, so I'm going in and selecting those straight edges and asking them to be chamfered again. So you can see I've just done that there. What we're left with is we've got some triangles in here, which is fine. Triangles aren't the end of the world. We're not going to be sculpting this asset in any way whatsoever, so there is the option to leave it as it is, but I do change these sections later on in the video. Here you can see I'm just kind of grabbing those straight lines, so I'm taking the edge that's causing it to be straight and just pulling it back so that we've got a more rounded look to that section of the model. Here's probably the trickiest part of the asset. In order to create these little cutouts, these little grooves, you want to do these without adding too many edges, and I believe I start doing this by just thinking, well, maybe I can just cut these out using the cut tool, which is Alt and C on the keyboard. I'm kind of looking over here as whether I can do them as sort of, I can connect them, or if I can just insert vertices to do it. So here you can see I'm using the cut tool, so that's Alt and C, and then you can just create slices into your asset. The cut tool is absolutely fantastic, but one caveat with it is you need to be a little bit more experienced with the program for using it. You can make some very horrible mistakes by not really understanding how to use the cut tool and just going ahead with it. This section here, I believe I completely changed my mind, so but you can see my working out. I'm kind of trying to work out whether I can use the vertices that I've just created there and add in connects instead of running a line straight through the middle of the asset. But then I realised that the little drop down area where the two black rubber buttons are, I wanted to change that. So instead I decided I wanted to cut straight across the asset. There's also a little cutout exactly the same on the bottom part of the asset of the controller as there is on the top. So there you can see I undo everything, and then I'm looking for, okay, so how's the nicest way, or the cleanest way of putting a slice straight through the middle of the asset, and that is by using an option called slice. So you can see here that I'm looking for it, and it's this top one just there, quick slice I believe it's called, or slice plane, sorry, slice plane is what we're looking for. So slice plane, it basically gives you a plane, so you can see the square that I'm moving around, so wherever that square is where it's going to slice straight through. So it's as if you're kind of using like a saw, a bandsaw or something, and you're slicing straight through. I wanted the slice to be obviously completely vertical, so I've turned on the rotation snap tool and then rotated the slice plane, and then you just hit slice. So you can see there, I'll do it again here, so you move it across to where you want the slice to be, and then over on the right you click on slice, and then if I just deselect the slice plane tool, you can see that I've put two lines running straight through the middle, straight through the asset all the way through, so all the way, and on the underside as well, it's the same thing. So I'm now kind of in my head, I'm working out where can I start putting in these extra lines to be able to do this cutout. I'm kind of already thinking ahead and thinking, where am I going to move the edges to. One thing that is really important with any 3D model that you make is that no sides to any face are more than four-sided. You'll see, I'll explain this again later on in the video, because there is an area where I change things from being five-sided to four-sided. But whenever you're modeling anything, you need to make sure that you don't have any more than four sides to any face. So here's me just putting extra edges in order to create this cutout section. I do exactly the same thing on this part here as I did just a second ago. So I select the two vertical edges, and then I use a connect in order to put a line straight through the middle. So here you can see, select one, hold down control, select the other, and then I'm hitting connect, and I'm going to slide that up so that it's roughly the same distance away as it is on the top section. And then I'm going to come to press 1 on the keyboard to go back to my vertices, and I'm going to select those two there and hit connect, and then I'm going to select the other two on the other side and put a connect in there as well. Just this is to make sure that we don't have any more than four sides running around that part of the asset. The next step, I'm pressing 4 on the keyboard to get to faces, and then I'm just selecting the two that I need to move, and I'm just deleting them. Then 2 on the keyboard will give you your edges, and at this point I'm moving the edge down, and I want to try and line it up with the horizontal edge at the bottom, so that we can create that sort of step. It is literally like a step, isn't it? But in order for me to kind of make that link and be, bang on horizontal, I'm right clicking the snap tool, I'm turning off grid points, and I'm changing it to edge, which means we're going to snap to edges now instead. So when I move this down, you can see I can point directly to the edge that I want, and it will snap to it. Now that's great, but it's snapping to it in all directions, so it's moving it in the y-axis as well. I don't want it to do that. So right click your snap tool, and then come down and just select this button here, that little tick box there, and that then allows axis constraints. It means I can move it only in the z-axis, you see. And if I then snap to that edge, it's moving it down as far as that edge, but it's not moving it towards that edge, it's only moving it in the z-axis, so that's perfect. Then we don't need the snap tool on anymore, so I'm just going to turn that off, and then I choose the two edges that I want, and I use the bridge tool over in the modify panel. So I'm going to do this again, look. So I select one edge, two edge, and then over on the right hand side find bridge, and it bridges a polygon in between the two. We do the same for the two holes here. So select two edges, hit bridge, and that fills them in. You can see I've created that nice little step in there, which is bang on, I think, where it is on the NES controller. So I do exactly the same thing at the bottom. I think I skipped this in the video so that you can see. It's exactly the same process. Perhaps I don't. I think I might do it again so that you can just watch again how I did it. So again, selecting two edges, choosing connect, moving them roughly to where I think they need to be. Same again on the top. Moving that one down. Then I'm pressing 1 on the keyboard in order to get to vertices, selecting the two that I want to connect together so that we don't have any more than 5 sides. Same on the other side. and then the same process again. So I'm pressing 4 on the keyboard so I can select faces, deleting them, selecting 2 on the keyboard for edges and then moving them up. Forgot to put my snap tool on, so I turn that back on again here, and then I snap it again only in the Z axis but lining up with that edge that I want it to step to. Bridging the 2 assets together again as we did on the last one, and then the same on the 2 sides, and we very quickly created that step at the top and the bottom. So my next issue is I'm looking at some of the faces on here. I've got more than 4 sides, so I'm wanting to change that. You can see straight away on the one where the mouse pointer is right now, that face there has more than 4 sides to it. So my process is to not target weld but to connect vertices, and I do that by using the cut tool. So again, the cut tool is Alt and C, and that allows me to slice or cut straight across and add an extra edge in there. Right clicking in order to deselect the cut tool, and then I'm selecting these edges here and realizing that I'm going to redo them, so I'm moving them out of the way. And the way you do that is you just select them, hold down Control and hit backspace. Then I turn the cut tool back on again, which is Alt and C, and then I'm drawing back in where I want those cuts to be. And you can see now that I've stopped a 5-sided shape in there. And then using my target weld tool, and I'm looking at, well, can I reduce the amount of polygons or faces that I've got by moving this down to here? I'm kind of looking at it, I'm just moving it to begin with to see how it would look, or whether I should move that one up to there. And then I make my decision, and I turn on the target weld tool and weld it back together. There you could say I made a slight mistake. That sometimes you make mistakes using the cut tool, even I do, so just be very careful when you're using it. Make sure when you use the cut tool that you're definitely cutting from one vertex to another. You can quite easily cut from a vertex to an edge, and then you end up with 2 vertices that are very, very close together, and you won't actually notice that they're actually together. So here we go again, so selecting those edges, realizing that I'm going to redo them, so I just delete them, get them out of the way, and then I start using the cut tool again in order to slice where I want edges to be. So that one goes up to there, this one to here, and then the third one in the middle, we're going to push that one to there as well. So again, this is just a process of me reducing the asset down as much as I can. I'm not too worried about having 3-sided faces, having triangles in here, and I'm not overly fussed about things looking super pretty. A lot of people do. They get quite concerned with their 3D models not looking absolutely beautiful in terms of the sort of the shape of the verts and the polys. I do change it up a little bit just here, so I decide that instead of having that triangle at the top that meets with the little cutout area, instead of it being sort of a non-symmetrical triangle like that, I select all of these verts and move them over to the right slightly so that they do look a little neater. You'll see that I do that just now. Yeah, it's done just to neaten up ever so slightly. Again, it depends on how OCD you're feeling that day as to how much you want your model to be bang on. So here again, I'm kind of looking on the other side and thinking, well, I don't have the cuts at the top and the bottoms, but it's probably going to be necessary to still put them in. Reason being that I think here's where I kind of point out and realise that I've got 5-sided shapes. I'm looking at whether I can just move this and if it would be enough. This is my first look at it before I realised I've got 5-sided shapes in there, so I move it to here, and then I'm like, actually that doesn't look too bad, and then I realise that this bottom shape here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which isn't great. So I'm now looking at, okay, I'm going to have to do a cut straight down, and so I use the same technique as we used the first time round. So I'm going to my slice plane tool, and it's already set to slice in the right direction, so I'm just placing it first, hitting slice, turning off slice plane, and then we've got a line there that we can use to connect some of these extra verts and edges too. So I'm back to target weld, and I'm just welding those two there, and then I can see, right, this one to this one, again using the cut tool. Actually, I think I used the connect tool this time around. So cut and connect are pretty much the same. Cut allows you to cut through extra edges, but the connect tool allows you to connect two vertices together. So you can see here that I've cut this down now to make 4-sided shapes, and I'm going to do the same thing here. So at the minute that top shape there is a 5-sided shape, so I'm going to select from here to here, pull a line straight across using the connect tool, which means that section there is now 4-sided, and then I can go in here and remove that edge there. So that means that piece is 1, 2 up to the top, making sure it's connected. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I'm just running around the asset, just checking whether I've done things correctly. And I'm also here, I'm right clicking the little plus, going to the stats, changing it to triangle count, turning everything else off and hitting apply, and that allows me to see how many tries I'm using so far. The software that I'm using to do this voiceover, I'm looking at the video, but it's quite pixelated, so I can't read how many tries I'm on at the moment. I think I finished this model on about 700 and something, 740, something like that, and that's without the little wire that comes out the back. So that's more than enough for me to use an extra few polygons to add a wire in at the end. But here I've selected all the vertical edges running around the asset. I've clicked connect, and then I'm using the new edge that I've just put into this red one that you just saw there, and then using scale just to push it out. The controller's not completely straight. It's got a ever so slight sort of bend in it. So that's me doing that. So I'm just coming back out of our fully shaded view, and I've turned my my asset inside out again so that I can see the picture below. I'm then going and using a cylinder, drawing from the middle of the red, one of the red buttons, and clicking and dragging out in order to make the shape. Moving it up into position, and then realizing that we've got way too many height segments. So in the modify panel for this cylinder, so if I come up here, I'll show you the modify panel just there, and then I change the height segments. I spin them down to 1. Next is to again turn this into an editable poly so that we can make adjustments to it. And the first thing, the buttons have a slight little indent where the thumb would go when you're playing a game. So the first thing that I want to do is kind of create that little indent there. It doesn't need to be super detailed. Here you can see I'm just jumping back one step and reducing the amount of sides. Obviously circles are going to take up more polygons, so choose whatever you think is good for you. I think I changed that one down to 16. Okay, so this bit I did an inset, so I selected the top using face, so number 4, select the top, click inset, bring it in a little bit, and then hold down control and select vertices, and that will keep the selection selected, and then I can with all of the verts selected, come down and choose collapse, which brings them all down into one vertice, and then I can remove those down. Then I've selected all of the edges, so number 2 on the keyboard, and then select all the edges running around the outside edge of the button. Then use another chamfer and adjust the chamfer slightly so that it's rounded off and the button isn't quite so sharp as it is in real life. Once that's done, deselect the asset by clicking the editable poly button. Then choose the asset, or choose the asset again, or the button, and then hold down Shift and drag it to move it into position. Here you can see I have a go at doing the rubber buttons. Again, exactly the same process as before with the red buttons. I start with a cylinder. I'm moving it up into position, and one of the first things that I realise when I'm modelling this piece now is I turn it into an editable poly, and I try and just scale it, try and move it so that the button is oblong instead of being completely circular. And the first thing I realise is that I haven't got enough polys in there vertically. As you can see here, I'm trying to select the ones I want, and I realise, okay, I'm going to need to add some more edges in on this this button. So I go back to its modify panel, push the edges back up to 18, and then turn it back into an editable poly. Then I can choose all the verts on one side of it and bring them across, and that easily creates the shape that we want for the button. From here, I then want to link all of the edges. I think I got carried away at this point here, and I wanted to do the little chamfer that we did on the red button. I was looking to try and do it again here before I realised I should probably connect these edges together first. I also realised there's probably too many edges running around the outside. The button looks a bit too slick. It's only a really small button on the asset, so after I've connected these together, so again I'm using the cut tool. Be very careful when you're using it, make sure you're cutting from a vert to a vert. It's very easy to get this wrong, and then you'll run into problems and trouble. So Alt-C again is the cut tool, just to let you know. When you've got the cut tool active, you can rotate and move around your asset, as I'm doing here. So don't feel like you've got to, when you're using the cut tool, you've got to stay in the viewport looking exactly as the way you were when you selected the cut tool. You don't need to. So here I'm kind of looking at how can I create this little chamfered area around the asset. So I'm just running around and selecting all of the faces, all of the edges. So just finishing that off here. Accidentally moved it. Okay, there we go. And then I use the chamfer tool again, and it's only a really small chamfer. You see, if you do it too much, then you end up with issues. So there's the chamfer, and I bring it right down, and then just step it up slightly, just so it's got an ever so slight roundedness to it. It doesn't need to look too perfect. It's a very small part of the asset. As long as it's modelled correctly, we're all good. So here's where I realise I've probably got too many edges. It's just a bit too round. So I jump in and choose 4 of the edges to get rid of. So there's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and hold down Control and hit backspace to delete them. And then we've got a slightly funny shape, so I just select those edges there, scale them in ever so slightly, or move them up and then scale them in. And the same on the bottom, and that saved us a few polygons. Not many, but enough so that we can, we've got a few extra to use elsewhere, such as the wire that comes out the back. So with that done, again I turn the asset or copy the asset over. Just before I do that, I've realised I can save some more polygons, so I'm already sort of thinking about how I can save more edges. So you can see here that basically we're never going to see the underside of those buttons. So select the asset, go into its editable properties, turn on faces or press 4, delete the underside, and then deselect the asset. So deselecting the asset is a simple case of, you'll see I'll do it here, of just pressing the edit poly button at the top, or deselecting what you have selected, I should say, really. Okay, moving on. I'm going to go to a box, and this is probably one of the more trickier pieces to model in this asset. It's really not that difficult at all, but it's probably the trickiest section in terms of making sure we get this to look right, because it's quite a square piece. Obviously it's a D-pad, but it does have some really small sort of chamfered edges in it, and the process in which you do it could cause some problems. So I've created a box, and then I'm choosing my faces, choosing all the faces around the outside, and then I've selected extrude. Now you can extrude by normal, which will push them all out in the same way, or you can choose by polygon, which is what we want here, look, and that extrudes them out as individual polygons. So then we can just scale that up, get it to sit exactly where we want it. Okay, next thing, I want to add in these chamfered edges. So I know that they're going to be the most expensive part of this piece, so I'm going to jump in and add them in now so I can see what it's going to look like. So here you can see I'm changing this to quad. It allows me to connect them a little better later, and then I'm just adjusting this to see what sort of shape I want them to be. Once I'm happy, clicking on the tick. Then I can see here that I want to connect these together. So I'm selecting 1 and 2, and then I'm choosing weld, and click the little settings box next to weld, and then just push it up, and you can see that it will weld it for me. Once you've done it once with the settings box, it will remember those settings, so you don't need to go back to the settings box again. You can just select, and then hit weld. So that's welded all those sections together. There are straight lines on those bits there, so I do jump in and push those in a second. Before I do that, I select the underside, click grow once, and it will grow any extra polygon that's on the outside of the one that you selected. It will select, and then I'm deleting. So again, I'm saving on polys as I'm modeling, which is probably quite smart to do. Next, I'm looking at selecting all of these little verts that are causing a straight line, and then I'm using my scale tool and just adjusting the scale slightly so that it pulls them all in. And then I want to do exactly the same thing for the outside edges, but obviously I'm going to scale outwards as opposed to inwards, and that will push those all out and create that nice rounded look that we're going for. So here they're all selected, and then scale's still active, and I just push the scale slightly so it pushes them out and creates a nice round shape. So the next piece is I'm looking at how can I add this sort of chamferedness to all of the outside edges of the model. So my process of doing that is to delete all of the vertical edges that are coming down from this top section. So we come to a more of a sort of side-on view, select everything including the bottom, and delete. You can see what we're left with is just that top. Then I'm choosing this option here, which is called border. Looks like a little kidney bean. Select that one, and then I'm coming into the top view, looking at it through wireframe, which is F3, and then using scale, and I'm scaling it out. Now you can see it doesn't scale it all uniformly, even though we've got uniform scale turned on. So what I need to do, I'm looking at the amount that I want it to scale out by, and then the areas that are scaled too much, so all of the sort of the ends like these ones here, I'm just going to my vertices selection, so press 1 on the keyboard, select the verts that are sticking out too far, and then just eyeball it, move them down or move them across so that they kind of fit where you want them to. Again, there's no need to be amazingly precise with this. We're not sending it off to be 3D printed. It's just a 3D model for us to use in a game at some point, so and you're just doing it for practice. So there you go, I've moved them all into position. I'm going back to border, and then I'm using shift and drag in order to create a little bit of a step there, and then shift and drag again to bring them down. And that's pretty much it for the D-pad. I do go back in and select all of the edges, and the D-pad's got a bit of, it's sort of sunken down in the middle, so I jump back in and I select all the outside vertices. So you can see here I go 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then come to a perspective view and just grab the move tool and just bring them up slightly, and that's pretty much what the D-pad section looks like. Okay, now that concludes all of the 3D modeling for this asset, and the next tutorial will look at textures.